Welcome. My name is Heather Sims, and I joined the Digital ACE team in the summer, where there was a working party, and I worked as part of Strand 5, looking at how we work with low-skilled learners as a result of COVID and the migration over to online learning. So just a quick reminder that the Digital ACE project has been designed to support ACE providers as they develop their online offer and help them to keep the high standards and move forward. The purpose of this session was to really help to pull together some of the responses and the lessons that we've been learning since lockdown. And the team that met in the summer came from all over the country, and Sarah House, who chaired that meeting, then wrote up the report for Strand 5, which I highly recommend you take a look at because it has some super case studies in there, and also it shares tools and links and all sorts of resources. And in addition to Strand 5, there were quite a few other strands. So there is a strand on policy, on safeguarding and prevent, on developing resources, on quality assurance, on underpinning technology, and our one on low-skilled learners. So I can highly recommend that you take a look at the HOLEX digital ACE scheme, and you will find that also on the WEA website. So this particular session was about engagement for learners, and the way it worked was these are really a series of prompts, and the group that came together discussed these, and again it was people from all over the country talking about their experiences, their concerns and their successes, and there are quite a few of both. So as we go through, I'm very much hoping that you might find the same thing. You might use these with your teams as prompts to discuss what the pictures could mean, the images, and your own experiences. So for me, this image is about learner engagement because it shows lots of enthusiasm, lots of energy, lots of interest in the food source and the resources there. And so this was how I introduced the topic. And of course, right now, we are looking at a new landscape. It's not the way it has been. And as we now enter March, we're looking forward to what could happen in the future. So it could be that we have a hybrid mix. So some fully online courses, some courses which are back in the classroom, and some a mix according to the learners we have. And on this strand, we're looking at low-skilled learners. So not necessarily low-level learners, but low-skilled in terms of technology. And that landscape is changing too, because since March, many of the learners who were extremely reluctant or didn't have the equipment they needed are now becoming equipped and are learning how to deal with the technology themselves. So it's a maturing landscape right now. So in terms of learners, I think one of the key questions would be, if I make the effort to get through, particularly if I'm having technical details, is it going difficulties? Is it going to be worth it for me? What's in it for me? And certainly in our team, we discovered that we were jumping through all sorts of hoops to help learners get online and then give them a good social experience. But I feel in addition to that, we have to be very aware that they need to be learning and taking away good experiences from their learning. And so I'll cover that in a moment, just to make sure that we are looking at learning as well as the fun aspect of getting through. A very key aspect now is feeling safe online and being safe online. And for tutors, one of the key aspects to this is keeping our learners safe, making sure they are aware of safety guidelines and who to report to if they have any worries or concerns. But the flip side of that also is our own expectations of learners, because there is a sense of wanting not to overstretch them, not to make them feel intimidated or frightened by the medium. But I think we need to continue to give them stretch and challenge as well as the support as they go forward in their learning, because that will tap into the sense that they are achieving and it's worth their while. This slide for me represents the initial assessment. So is your learner in the right place? And you can only know that if you've done a good assessment right at the beginning. And that's just the same as it was when learners were in the classroom. So during our discussions, we had various models for that. Some learners are still being having an induction and an assessment online. Some learners were having a telephone conversation so that they could be assessed, usually one-to-one. And there were other models too. One of the things that came out that seemed to be very important was that a friendly face at the other end, if it's going to be on a meet or however this is done, and a person with a name so that the learner could really feel that they had contact with someone. It's not a nameless institution when they come through. Being in the right group can really, really help because you're going to find that there are difficulties anyway. And if a learner is thinking, again, I'm either out of my depth or they are comparing themselves quietly in the background and not telling you, that can be a risk to the general willingness to engage. And so that initial assessment and then follow-up assessments, or at least following progress and getting feedback from the learner to make sure that they feel that they fit and therefore are beginning to build confidence within the group. The next slide is about equipment. Some learners we know are lucky enough to be on their laptops and working with you, and that's probably the best scenario. And then iPads or phones. If you have people working on a phone, they can be disadvantaged. And so we discussed the need to check when you're preparing resources that they can work on a phone. It's very easy to overlook the fact that all learners are not on the same equipment, but you soon find out if you're live that some learners just cannot access what you've provided. So it needs thorough checking as you work with your resources. I do have a slide coming up which will mention making sure that your font is large enough, so 20 plus, and also perhaps not having a plain white glaring background to help learners. Here we are. And also, if the challenge for a learner is great to get them onto the technology, then by the time they reach you, they may well already be feeling tired and a bit stressed. So at that point, it might be an idea to have a sort of a quick win task where they're going to feel they've achieved. It is worthwhile, but they have achieved something, rather than going for stretch and challenge very quickly on top of the really the quite stressful time of getting on. You may find that this is changing now because many learners have already experienced the learning experience online, and they're getting familiar now with getting onto your Meet. So that could be, again, back to that changing landscape now that we're in March. On a tough day, the two things I'm thinking here is really for tutors to reassure you if you're working hard and you're anxious that you're not giving your learners the best that you could. Just have a think before you start. What matters most for each learner? How can you achieve that? It may be that whatever you deliver is actually in your Meet, or it could be that you are following up in other ways to help them engage. So using other channels, whether that is a phone call that follows up, it could be a one-to-one with a learning support assistant. It could be gelling as part of the group and having a social chat. It just depends on the learners you have and what their needs are. But that is the starting place, is really what are your learners' needs. And although we mentioned initial assessment, this is a continuous process, something that all learners, their situations are changing practically day by day. And so we do need to be very flexible. And that came up a lot during our working party. Some of the things for learners we are really part of being human. So if I just give you a second to look at the slide that's on the screen at the moment, they're not exactly in order, but relatedness is one of the things in lockdown, which is really essential for learners, because for many people it's a time of loneliness, or it can be a time of isolation. It can be a time when people are stuck at home, as we know, and they really do need that encouragement to bond with others and to share. One aspect on there is sharing a goal. So it could be a learning goal, but actually taking the focus off the learner and onto a task that's on the screen where they can join in with others and work together on something that will create a very good bonding feeling. And if you're looking through other webinars, you might take a look at Eduardo's one on collaboration, where he shares quite a few tools, learning tools, which are really useful in getting learners to play online and share their goals. One thing that can also be very helpful is offering choice, and it can be a very simple choice. It could be whether to mute yourself or whether to take a break when you need to, not to be forced to sit for too long in front of the screen, being asked to go and get something, and maybe it all begins with the letter S or something like that. So everybody has a little break from the screen and is choosing something that they bring back, or they're going to talk about, or whether they're going to use the chat if they can do that, so that even though you're keeping things fairly simple, that element of choice and the element of control being handed over to your learner is still there. On there I have familiar routines, and by that I mean it could be that you're very flexible now in the times that you are working with your learners, but within a session, I think it will really help if you can have some elements that will reassure them they can expect to find certain things happening. So it could be that there's a social chat around the break. It could be that if you were English, you do a little bit of spelling at some point and they know that's coming up. Or they know that there's going to be a time when a particular maths problem is shared. Whatever it is, keep some elements that learners know they can expect to be in there, and that is reassuring in itself. This slide is about learners who possibly are quiet on screen and they're not sure why, but it could also be about learners who you've taught in the past in the classroom, but now you're finding it even harder to reach them because they don't have the equipment that they need. Some services are now going out of their way to provide equipment to those learners. So it could be an iPad, it could be a phone, it could be a laptop, depending on what you have available, but also backing that up with a response team who can buddy up with that learner and help them get through onto the Meet if they have technical details, or can also do some basic training with them so that they have the confidence to get online. For other people, it has been the case that they've needed to provide materials that are sent out to learners so that they have things that they can work on at home, and then they might just have a phone call, or they might be going on to a Meet and not actually going through a lot of tasks online, except for that having that contact. Again, it comes down to need and meeting the needs of your learners. I'm sure we've all come across the distractions which can happen online because the situation is very different. If learners are working in their own homes, they have a whole field of different things that can happen. And so they do need to know about muting themselves and turning off their video. And one of the tutors who was in this discussion demonstrated that she has made herself little cards that she can hold up with the symbols for the icons for mute and video, so that she, and also for a tick for correct and cross for not right, and also a question mark for I'm not sure, so that she can share those, and it means she doesn't have to use her voice all the time. So some training and ground rules around behaviour is clearly necessary at the moment. This one I've called on our agenda because as busy tutors and curriculum managers, we have so much already that we're trying to achieve and deliver, and these are the kind of areas that we're working on. But one of the main things, and the sort of underpinning emotion, I think, is to make a difference to our learners. And I am certainly finding that while I want everything lined up nicely, very orderly, like this picture with things growing in just the right place, it is more challenging online in one sense, in that it's less predictable, what you're going to be faced with, what's going to happen within the time. So that flexibility and the need to anticipate is greater. But there is also the wonderful thing about being online, that you can make available resources to your learners so that they can work during the week and access all kinds of things that you've stored for them, perhaps in a Google Classroom or somewhere like that. And many learners are actually engaging with that very well, and also enjoying things like BKSB, where they can work at their own pace. And you can also flip your class so that as they get used to working in between times, they're actually coming to the class far more sort of bursting with knowledge and questions and skills than perhaps they did in the live classroom before. So this one is addressing the range of learners you might find, or at least the range of behaviours. There's quite a lot of evidence now about the different styles of learning. So you might have a learner who's prepared to open up and share everything, and that learner may need a little bit of control or the guidelines being reminded so that they share the airtime with other learners. Then you might have a learner who's very happy to do a bit of research. They're used to Googling things, and they will come up with some sort of facts or things that they've found out. You could have one who will happily answer a question, but otherwise not going to be volunteering very much. And then there's also a group of learners who are there, but they are not really saying anything, and you can't really tell whether they're engaging. I mean, you're not sure what's going on in the background. But those learners may well be simply nervous about volunteering something or speaking online. They may prefer the chat facility, or they may need other channels available to them, whether that is email or by playing a game which draws them in but doesn't make them feel exposed. And we looked at a number of those, and again, I'd say have a look at the collaboration video, where Eduardo actually demonstrates a number of tools that can be used for that. In addition, there is the resources video that is worth watching, or the webinar about making resources. And this slide is about inclusivity. So how do you make sure that all learners feel welcome to join your class, and that you support them and underpin their learning. In my own practice, we do have wonderful learning support assistants who will work in the background and in separate meets with our learners, one-to-one, to help them and to bring them into the main meet as soon as they can. And that's one way we do it, but also building on learners' own experience. And even on their own homes, they may want to bring something up to show. They might have a piece of artwork that they've done at home, or something that they're very pleased with that they'd like to share with the group. And so building on the personal experiences of learners does make everybody feel more welcome. Recently, in my own teaching, I asked everybody, because it's the beginning of spring, if they had access to outside, to go outside and bring something in. And if they couldn't go outside, to go to their favourite place in the house and bring something to the screen that they're particularly fond of. And in fact, everybody was able to go outside and came back with snowdrops as it's spring. And that's just coincidence, but it was lovely, and it was a lovely gelling moment for everyone. And then it opened the doors to discussion about spring and how they're feeling with the changing times and so on. So I think taking advantage of both on-screen and off-screen can help to keep the inclusivity going. So coming to just a few points that are similar to the ones that I've made before. Particularly the third point here, how can learners get in touch with you? If they're not happy to speak to you on a meet, what ways do you have that they can reach you? Is it through your own admin team? Do they have a phone number? Can they email you? What happens? Or is there a follow-up for them? Are you also doing reflections at the end of your session, so that one way or another, your learners are feeding back to you? In all the strands, that's coming through as something that's very important. The monitoring, obviously you don't have the full range of information that you would if they were sitting next to you in a classroom. So now that sort of to and fro between you and your learner is very important. This slide for me represents the ideal intention of the learner interacting and engaging for 80%, and as tutors, we delivering for 20%. But I have seen in a number of sessions that something that happens when you first go online is a sense of responsibility for the session, almost as if you have to keep talking and you have to fill in the gaps. But that is actually not the case. If you can generate tasks which allow learners thinking time, and you can begin to delegate as they become more confident, so that the learner takes over the role, for instance, of asking questions, or you're using a learning tool which allows them direct access to a game, where you can actually just take yourself out of the picture and let the learners work together. It could be even that you turn off your video when they're ready for it. You turn off your video or your audio, and learners know you're going to do it, but that you are there, and you let them get on and interact. And once they know that that has happened, they will begin to organise themselves the same as they would in a classroom, where at times they enjoy that chat and they enjoy not being directed at all times by you. So I think it's really high time we were shifting that emphasis over to our learners and empowering them to take the lead. This slide for me represents the times when you might ask a question and you get "don't know" as a reply, and it's encouraging you to think about why learners might say they don't know. So it could be just sheer embarrassment for the moment they're put on the spot and they're not ready to answer. It could be a genuine thing that they don't know the answer to the question. And if that's so, was the question correctly phrased for them? it could be that they actually need more processing time. And so, and this one is really thinking about pace and slowing down the thinking so that learners have time to think things through. And it could be, again, referring to flipping, where you would set learners up maybe with questions through Google Classroom that they can think about during the week, and maybe do some talking to other people or reading papers or whatever they can do to come up with answers, rather than be expected to know something on the spot. So in this slide, this is about the things that we know are, they are very demanding in terms of intellectual load. And so it's really good to have all of these in a session, but at the same time to drop back from the intensity of these so that learners can relax in between times. So if, for example, you asked learners to put into priority certain choices, something like that, perhaps then some discussion around them, and then coming back again to, well, have we got the right order for this? Do you still think the same? And so that you reinforce the thinking, you help them to that decision. Quite an easy task would be to have something like a sheet on a slide where you can see something I know, I don't know this, and a third column for not sure or would like to know more. So simple visual aids where learners can decide which column things go in. But we know that all these areas they take a high cognitive load. So if you're just on one of these, it might be an idea then to take a little break or have a little social time, something that eases up from any of these challenges. So this one, at first glance, you might think I'm thinking of learners. Are they all ears and are they all listening to what's being said? And certainly listening skills are certainly challenged and brought to the fore online. But I think it's also one for tutors, because the listening skills come in for us very strongly. Those learners may not say exactly what they mean. They may hint at things in the background of what they're actually saying, and we don't have all the other ways of knowing how they're feeling. We don't have the sort of bodies next to us where you can tell if the temperature's gone up or how they're feeling exactly. So we do have to sort of use our eyes and ears much more than perhaps before, in order to just pick up on the signals that learners are giving, and perhaps offer reassurance, perhaps make sure they know about safeguarding, perhaps follow up with a phone call, and perhaps ask the right questions to find out more. And also maybe just take the time to give them the time to do what I'm doing right now, think through what they're trying to say. So I suppose that it brings you on to this one, which is if a learner says they are all right, are they getting on independently? You can't always see what learners are doing. So are they actually working independently and happy, or have they got stuck? Perhaps they are feeling a bit isolated and they don't want to say on the meet. So again, it's coming back to that follow-up. And I really would recommend that you take time to do one-to-ones fairly quickly. And this came up on quite a few of the talks that happened in the summer in the discussions, the importance of meeting with a learner one-to-one, either you or your learning support assistant, just to identify any issues that are coming along that they haven't raised. And also to make sure that you are giving that little bit of extra assistance if they should need it. But at the same time, we have a huge workload too. And so it's going to be very important for us to be mindful of the demands that are on us. And for learners to know that, yes, we do want to hear from them. But for instance, if they choose to email at 10 o'clock at night, they probably won't get an answer until the next day, or whatever times we set. And equally, we would be setting reasonable boundaries on when we will contact them so that they're not disturbed in the evening. I know you can turn off notifications on your phone, but not all learners know how to do that. And if they are going to get interrupted as Google Classroom gets updated, that can be a bother for them. So use due consideration. So on this slide, I'm thinking about the steps that we can put in place to encourage our learners to get braver in their learning and to start taking calculated risks. And that's true for us as tutors as well. The small steps, moving from small achievements that make them feel, yes, it was worth coming and I can do this. The priming, that means they have time to think forward and investigate things offline so that they come equipped for the next session. The support that we can put in place during the week, the scaffolding that's available to them, makes the calculated risk much more likely to be successful. So thinking time, this could be a topic that we've already discussed, so the processing time different learners take to work through things. Could be very engaged, but needing that time. But it could be for us as well, because things are changing all the time. And so we need to be planning ahead as well and thinking, this is where we are now, but where are we going next? Are we covering the things that we need to cover? And how is that going to happen? So it's a continual assessment and planning in so that we cover our objectives as well. And it could very well be that we are slowing down in terms of what we deliver session by session, so that we ensure the points are covered, and then we know that we need to revisit things, not immediately afterwards, but maybe in 3 weeks' time, in a month's time, in 3 months' time. And so are we building those points in as we go along, so that the retrieval is going to happen and our learners will be surfacing from the Brambles with lots of skills, knowledge, behaviour and attitudes that we're looking for. Just a note on this one, which I've talked about already, but at the bottom, just a thought that if things are difficult enough for learners getting onto Line, then think about how you actually present the information that you're going to present. If you can have one way of doing it, so it might be that you have a Padlet, or you have a set of slides that a learner knows how to get to, and from there can just work their way through the slides, or you are simply sharing your screen and they're working from it there. Whatever your way of doing things is, I would recommend, and this is recommended in other webinars as well, that you keep it simple and keep it easily accessible for learners, so that the technology is not a barrier. Once they're there, it's straightforward. And then from there, as confidence grows, if everybody's confidence is ready, you can start to build in new ways of doing things. So for instance, in my own class with Google Classroom, we started with Google Docs, but since then we moved on to Google Slides, we've shared screen, all kinds of things that perhaps at the beginning wouldn't have been imaginable, but my learners are now very happy to do it. And some of them are better than I am. So I think it's a good experience and well worth doing, but take it steady so that all learners go with you and don't get overwhelmed. I think this slide pretty much speaks for itself, but I would look at the area on the fourth point down about looking at the learners in terms of what resources they can bring. And one of the ways that they can really contribute is to build their expertise. So it could be something that you've already taught them, or it could be something they already know. But as soon as a learner shows that they can contribute in a way, back off and let them do it. And I've really noticed that, particularly with technology, that once a learner has got to grips with, say, knowing their way around a screen, they're very good at helping each other to access chat or find the mute button, different things like that, which can be an absolute blessing. And so look for ways where your learners can shine, anywhere they can shine and they can take the lead. I think quieten down and let them do that. So I'm coming towards the end of this presentation now. And these are just reminders. Finally, I'm thinking about where you're going next with your learners. So we're coming to that time of year now where we might think about their examinations coming up, or what they're going to do next year, or which courses they could go on to next, or whether it's going to be employability that's right for them. I think it's one of those things, if you've been building that already into your courses, then wonderful, because that will help learners keep engaged, because they can see a greater purpose for them doing what they're going through. And as we emerge from lockdown, it could be that their next steps are going to change, because maybe possibilities will open up for them, or things have changed in their own circumstances. So again, it's back to flexibility, but also given that we're online, the possibilities there may be greater. And one thing that tutors in this discussion raised was that they now have access to a wider range of learners, because learners can join them from different towns, whereas they used to be very local. And so that will change the advice that the tutor can give. If you look into what their long-term goals are, you'll probably find that they might be wanting to visit different organisations, or bring in speakers from outside, which is very easy to do now. So it does open up lots of possibilities for us going forward. Just a little thank you to Alan Marshall for allowing me to use his, I think, lovely illustrations. And I mentioned that my name is Heather Sims, and if you would like to get in touch with me at any time, my email address, hsims26@gmail.com. I also work for Bucks Adult Learning, and I'm delighted to have been able to give this presentation. I have 2 more to do, so I hope to see you on another one.